like to ask you about this coordination, those coordination activities. How to coordinate activities of various stakeholders like member states, European Union, but also NGOs and companies into effective implementation of CCS on whole the chain, starting from CO2 capture, transport and storage.
Okay, then I'm the lucky one starting here. My name is Kai Lima and I'm representing Statoil Hydro. Just to give a short background, my company has been working on CO2 issues for quite a lot of years, and we are part, in fact, operator of 3 of the 4 largest CCS projects in the world. That is the Sleipner project that has been in operation since '96, and also Snøhvit in the Barents Sea. We are co-operator with BP and Sonatrach in Algeria, and the 4th project is Weyburn in Canada, where we are not involved. Based on question, coordination of activities here. I think that public authorities, industry and NGOs are in fact here in the same boat. We have a common challenge in reducing CO2 emissions. So that should at least be a very good basis for trying to coordinate activities. And I also think that we have had quite a good start recently. I've been working specifically on CCS issues since 2006. And effort, interest, funding and so on has increased very much during that period. EU has done a good job. Australia is coming, different EU countries. Could also mention Norway as such. But what we need now is really not just to plan, we need to act. And therefore I think the financing and implementation of those demonstration projects are of paramount importance to get going here. In the longer run, I also think that's necessary for CCS to become a commercial activity. Now in this early stage it's very costly and the framework is not in place, therefore incentives are needed. But in the long run, in fact, I think it should be run on a commercial basis as such. And there I think the stakeholders will be quite different. If we take the CCS value chain, starting with capture or avoiding emissions, so to speak, that will be the challenge of the emitters. My company is one of them because we are producing our own energy to run the oil and gas platforms in the North Sea, for instance. But you also have the energy companies and so on. But they, or we, will be customers to the technology vendors, which will really be the companies that will make business out of this by selling the technology. You will have a presentation or at least a session from Aker later today, which is one of the potential winners, so to speak, in that respect. Transportation, there we could see both oil and gas companies taking part, which are today used to transport natural gas over long distances through pipelines, but we could also see regional and national distributors taking part in that business. And at the other end of the chain, the storage part, there I think oil and gas companies are in quite a good position because we are in many ways dealing with the same issues, although in some respect in an opposite way than we are doing when we are looking for oil and gas as such. So that's how I think the main focus will be. The capture part will be the challenge of the emitters with the income potential for the technology vendors. Transportation could be a mix, and storage will again be a commercial issue where oil and gas companies are among the main contenders. Thanks.
But for the past 10 years, we've been also working on energy and climate change. And we actually thought that doing CCS is a necessary tool to combat climate change already 12, 15 years ago. So when I listen to Eva's presentation, you cannot but be a little bit taken aback by the magnitude and the rocket science of CCS. I think somebody said that if you fail to prepare, you prepare to fail. And this expression is very pertinent with regard to CCS. It's a very comprehensive industrial project that has to take place. Now, many of us here in the panel are Norwegians, as you can see, and this is sponsored by the Norwegian Embassy very generously, and we're grateful for that. But I don't think there's a coincidence that we as Norwegians sit here and try to engage in a conversation with Poland on such an important issue as CCS. Norway is an immensely wealthy country, but Norway is also a country where we earn our living from exporting fossil fuels. We export oil and gas that that the purchasers burn and emit CO2. So we have, and we saw this very early, we would like to say we have a moral responsibility to spend the income that we get from exporting the fossil fuels to develop this kind of technology, because it will be important for ourselves to allow us to continue to sell fossil fuels. But more importantly, it will be important for those countries who are dependent on fossil fuels. So what we develop in Norway in terms of capture and storage technology on natural gas, there is a clear correlation to coal-fired power plants, which brings us to Poland. Now, Poland is a huge country compared to Norway. You are less wealthy, if I can put it that way, but you have an enormous dependency on using coal for producing electricity. And that is why we are very glad to be here today and to work with Poland to try to look at how we can identify the possibilities, the opportunities. We heard that the EU has a comprehensive program. We heard that the US, I agree with Pavel, there seems to be some kind of disorganization. True, but we are at a very early stage. And from an environmental point of view, we actually like to see a competitive element here. There should be a race. We raced to reach the moon, we raced during the Cold War. Now the race is to build CCS so that we can combat climate change. So I think there are different ways of looking at that situation. But let me just conclude by trying to point at the opportunities. We are in a situation where we do CCS for only one reason, that is to combat climate change. We are in a situation where you, as the most coal-intensive country in Europe, has a potential huge bill to pay if you only think about it in terms of the cost of the technology. But if we get this technology developed in Poland at an early stage, and we can do cost discovery, and we can reach economy of scale to bring the costs down, we can test the storage sites, and we can pay way for comprehensive storage of CO2 in Poland and in the North Sea, well then I believe that Poland has the potential of being a net exporter of clean energy in 20 years. And that, I think, is the kind of vision that we need to have to put in place. Because if we only talk about CCS as a cost element, it's true, it's going to be costly. And we need financial support from the EU, from the World Bank, from Norway, to help you to pay for these first demonstration projects. But in the long term, CCS in Poland should represent an economic benefit in terms of net exporter of clean energy, but also in terms of being a leading nation in combating climate change.